Welcome everybody to the first installment of the second season of Beers with Bill. It's my pleasure to welcome back Brent Klassen, Heartwood Farm and Cidery. Brent, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you agreed to be the first person for the second season. Cheers.
So honored. Yeah, thank you. Cheers, folks.
So Graham was asking earlier, what would be the best glass to serve cider in? Now, I mentioned that traditionally it would have been in a Pilsner glass because that would have been the most common glass people had.
Right. It's a good question. I mean, you know, cider is, and I know, and I'm honored to be featured on a show called Beers with Bill, but cider actually is not a brewing process, right? As is often mistaken. Cider is a winemaking process. And so my thinking would be that typically, you know, to open up the nose and the bouquet, you would probably want a typical wine glass that is, you know, in some way kind of concave at the top to sort of focus the aromatic stuff. That's normally how we drink it. But honestly, I don't give a shit. I mean, if you enjoy it, put it in whatever you want, I would say. You know, I tend not to be too precious about that stuff, to be honest. So there you go.
Oh, that's excellent. I always got a kick at that. The first time my wife got to enjoy my adopted family over in France, we were all sitting around the table and the wine was served in whatever glassware they had. And it didn't matter because it was about being with family. It was not about drinking the wine out of the perfect glass.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. So I'm curious, Bill. I'm happy to launch into this stuff at any time. But you know, you got us going by talking about sort of the start of the first season or the start of the second season. And I'm curious to know how you reflect on you know, the year gone by. Has it met your expectations? Has it exceeded them? Have there been, you know, surprises? What's it been like for you?
Oh, wow. I'm getting interviewed again. That's a good question, Brent. When I first embarked on doing this, David, who's may not be joining us tonight because I think he had a prior commitment, him and I had a long conversation. I said, oh, we might do 20 shows. Like, honestly, we'll do 12 and sort of reevaluate, but 20 is probably the top end. You know, who knows how long COVID's going to last and whether I really want to do this. So we went through all the particulars last week, 52 shows, 40 plus unique individuals on across those 52 weeks. Him and I actually tallied out the number of different beers and ciders that we drank over the course of that year. And it was just over 200 different beers and ciders that we went through. If you were to ask me, jokingly, I had a conversation with one of my guests in the middle part of July going, I set out to make as many mistakes as I could possibly do in the first 20 shows. And I continue to amaze myself in discovering things that I can do wrong even now. Last week, I forgot to send Ed the link for the show.
Okay.
So, you know, just, it's been a lot of fun. It's a great, unique community of people. And I am just honored and happy that they have all stuck with me and expanded over the last 52 weeks.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I got to admit, I myself have always been, you know, a bit of a Zoom skeptic. I much prefer people being together and, you know, 2 feet apart, not 2 meters apart. I like all that stuff. But at the same time, I'm kind of amazed by just the sheer, the way that I think the human desire for community can even transcend these times of social distance. And it's almost like it finds, you know, people find each other regardless of what the means are, right? And if it's going to be digital, it's going to be digital. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can't agree with you more. I mean, when we came out in September, the thing that stands out in my mind wasn't just spending the time with you and Val walking around the farm and talking about what was going on. It was that 40 minutes that we had afterwards where you, Jackie, and I sat around and enjoyed a glass of cider together.
Yeah.
And just had that relaxing conversation, because that's what was so important.
Yeah.
So before I get you to talk to me about mistaken identity, we haven't actually chatted since November. So how's Heartwood doing? How's Brent doing? How's Val doing?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's, I mean, so maybe I'll answer first on the personal level. We're doing pretty well. There's a whole bunch of things that we're looking at doing on the farm in the coming year, and I'm happy to get into that with folks in more detail if people are curious. I remember the first time you had me on, Bill. I came on solo, and all anybody wanted to talk about was farming. And so the next time you made me bring Val along so that we would actually get some expertise in answering those questions. So there are lots of plans. We've just, we're getting into a whole new aspect of regenerative agriculture that's called silvopasture, which is, silvopasture is kind of running animals in woodlands, in woody areas, and oftentimes kind of marginal woody areas. And so we're kind of experimenting with this, very intrigued by that. We're also, we went out and bought 3 prospector tents, and we're going to set those up here and rent them out to people so that, folks who are looking for, an opportunity to sort of get out of town or spend some time in a natural setting will be able to do so. So we've got all kinds of grand schemes for the coming year. And those things, honestly, that kind of, that puts a fire in the belly. It's exciting. It feels generative, even though we don't really know what we're going to be able to do or when we're going to be able to do any of this stuff. I would say you also asked how Heartwood is doing. From a business standpoint, I'm not going to lie, it's been a tough go. A year ago, we had our best months ever. There was something about the post-COVID flush that everybody wanted to buy booze, everybody wanted to buy it locally, and everybody wanted to buy it online. And suddenly we were just inundated. And so last year was a strong year, but I find that piece just hasn't kept up, right? And so I don't know if that's just that people are fatigued overall and just a bit more humdrum about things. I don't know, but it's definitely a struggle to kind of keep the wheels on, for sure. But nevertheless, we keep forging ahead. It feels like the work that we're doing is important. And when I say that, I don't mean just making cider. I mean the farming, the agricultural activities, and just the ways in which we're trying to, inspire regenerative connections for folks, right? That feels like important work. And so we're going to keep doing it one way or another. And hopefully there's a flourishing business backing us up. And, if there's not, we'll figure out some other way to do it. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's sort of the Cole's notes.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to hear about what you guys are going to be doing in the future. The Prospect tent sounds wonderful. You have such a wonderful space out there. To be able to share that with people is fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about mistaken identity.
So I was thinking about, the sort of the run up to this session and thinking about what do I want to talk about? And there's a really interesting, there's an interesting space. And I no doubt many of your guests have talked about this. And it's this, the space that we've kind of called craft, right? But I was sort of reflecting on, like, what is craft? And it struck me that there's kind of a blend of art and science. You know, art can be, it can be capricious. It can be unpredictable. It's about novelty and uniqueness, right? It's about sort of the unknown and even the outlandish, right? And on the other hand, you've got science that's about chemistry and physics and recipes and repeatability and peer review, and right, and all that kind of stuff. And there's this really interesting space that I think we've kind of come to call craft, which is sort of a hybrid of those things. And people often ask us, you know, how do you nail a recipe over and over again? And I always kind of answer that I actually don't think we do. I mean, we aim the arrow at a target, and there's a bullseye on the target, but we actually kind of know that we're not going to hit the bullseye. And there's a kind of a sense of being close enough. And close enough is an outcome of the fact that the harvest is different from year to year. The fruit is different from year to year. The recipes, somehow there's that place that's just outside your control, where things just kind of happen organically, that you don't know why they do all the time. And you hope that the way in which nature plays outside of your control is not horrible, although it can be sometimes. Oftentimes it's not. But this is the space of craft, I think, right? It's a space that's just outside of your absolute control. And so, you know, mistaken identity is kind of an interesting thing, because it started out to be something entirely different. We made a cider, I think 2 years ago for the first time, that was made with strawberry, and it was made with vanilla. And so I'll explain a little bit of the process here for anybody who's interested. When we sweeten, we only use sort of natural sweeteners, or I should say unrefined sugars. So maple syrup and honey are the ones we tend to use. We don't use a lot of them, but when we use a sweetener, it's either honey or maple syrup. And because those sweeteners have a lot of what's called colloidal material, or they have solids, a lot of solids in them, we tend to put those sugars into the cider the night before we're going to filter. And we stir it up really well. And the idea is we want to give the solids time to settle. But the timing, sort of the thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we get in there before those sugars begin to re-ferment, right? Because that's what will happen. I mean, there's obviously cider is a very live culture, and if you add sugar back into it and give it time, it's going to start to re-ferment. So we're making this batch of this cider. We called it Freckled Countess, and Matt, our cider maker, did as he always does, which is he added the maple syrup the night before, gave it a good stir, came in the next day to filter, wanting, as has always happened before and has always happened since, to intervene in that process before those sugars begin to re-ferment and filter it so that you get rid of all the microbiology. But when he came in the next morning, the thing was actively re-fermenting. I mean, it was a full roiling. I mean, it was like that tank of cider was on a full boil. And we kind of said, what are we going to do? We can't possibly run this through a filter because it's actively fermenting. What are we going to do? And we sort of debated, do we try to steer this back in the direction that we initially intended? Do we try to now that this has gone off in a different direction, do we try to rein it in? And we thought, we can't do that. It's going to have a little more alcohol. It's going to have different flavors because it's gone through a secondary fermentation. let's just see where it goes. And so we let it go. And there were times in that process where we wondered whether it would be salvageable. But, you know, at the end of the day, we let that fermentation run its course. And then we said, let's rather than filtering this, let's leave it unfiltered and bottle condition it. And bottle conditioning is when you take a cider that is now still, so there's no effervescence in it, and you bottle it with a bit of yeast and sugar. And so there's a fermentation that takes place in the bottle that generates the carbon dioxide. So we said, let's do that and cross our fingers and see what happens. And we did it and we loved it. Like it's sort of like it's the benevolence of an uncontrolled natural process that it just took its own turn and delivered something that we were actually delighted by. And so that's why we called it mistaken identity, because it is actually not what it was supposed to be at the outset. And it's sort of interesting because I've been doing a lot of thinking. I do some sort of business consulting as well. And I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about sort of old paradigms of management, right? In old paradigms of management, you know, there's some people call these predict and control paradigms, right? You try to predict a future, and then you try to control every variable to try to nail that future as you've predicted it. And there are other kind of what I would consider to be more interesting paradigms of management that are just emerging that would be depicted as maybe sense and respond, right? Where you're not actually trying to control all the variables for a predicted outcome, but you're actually just trying to develop a sensitivity to what's emerging, right? What wants to be born? What wants to die? What's passing away? What's coming into being? And you try to develop a sensitivity to those things. And then you try to develop a sense of presence so that you can fully activate the things that are emerging. And so, I mean, when I think about this from a management perspective, I find it really interesting. And in a way, that's exactly what the story that I just described, right? About mistaken identity, right? It's a situation where, you know, we tried to control the variables flipped us the bird. And so we just kind of went with it and responded. We responded to a process that was clearly unfolding outside of our direct control. And I feel like our ability to be present to that reality actually gave us an end result that is really delightful. So there's my little spiel about sort of management theory and mistaken identity. I'm not sure if any of that makes any sense at all, but that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
That is such a cool story about how you got that name. I love it. That's, you know.
We often, when we're, oh, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, I can even picture the roiling tank of cider too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really, I love that space. It's the space that's outside of your control, you know, I in cider and kind of in life. I mean, I don't want to be a sort of cheesy, get all cheesy philosophical on you guys here, but I do think that's a very rich place to explore and to just kind of inhabit. So that's mistaken identity. Yeah.
That's part of that process of, you know, even in winemaking, you go with, you can either try and contrive the process, or you can go with what this season's going to be, or what this process is going to give you.
Yeah.
And that art and science is always an intriguing synergy for sure.
It's very intriguing. Yeah.
And some of my favorite winemakers will wax philosophical too. The same thing. Don't ever apologize for that.
Yeah.
That's part of the great conversation.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Does anybody have any questions or things that you're interested in or curious about on that? Are you going to type them in the chat? I've got the chat window up here, or feel free to just ask too if that works.
You can see Sharaj, that this is the best naming story that we've heard, which is true. It's fantastic. And Katie, I love it when names actually aren't totally random. So,
yeah.
So what do you do to stay grounded with everything that's going on?
Wow. Do you mean personally?
Personally, what do you do? I mean, there's a lot of things that have happened even since the last time you and I sat down and talked.
Right.
You know, we've been open, we've been closed, we've been opened again, shut back down again.
Yeah.
Nobody in business is having fun. That's for sure.
Right.
So how do you stay grounded through all of that?
Yeah. Well, boy, I mean, I could answer that question on a number of different levels. I mean, I think personally, I have my own sort of disciplines and practices. Just talking about presence and stuff like that, as I was just doing. I mean, I'm one of many people who find a kind of a comfort in things like meditation, as a way of just trying to understand the sort of the narratives that spin through your mind and can really kind of just kind of colonize your imagination and to try to get outside of those. So I mean, I have things like that kind of ground me. Although I would say, for me, like finding community in the odd ways in which we find it these days is kind of essential, and I mean, I say that knowing that this is kind of precarious territory, right? Because I feel like all of us, we understand the laws, and we understand, the importance of all the public health guidelines. And at the same time, we're trying to manage for our own sanity, right? And our sense of social well-being. And we're really fortunate here that, we are able to keep our farm store open. And so we've got a fairly regular stream of people who just drop by to sort of buy cider. Graham was by the other day. We had a nice little chat, and so it like having those regular points of connection is, like, for me, just immeasurably important. And I would say from, Bill, you said that nobody in business is having fun. And while that's true, there's a kind of a craft in the challenge of just trying to stay open, right? Like, trying to figure out, okay, so what can we do? Like, what comes next? How can we be present to people, over the May long weekend, for example? So everything's shut down. We were hoping it wouldn't be, but it is. So we're launching these barbecue boxes. So it's grass-fed beef patties. This isn't meant to be a sale. I'm trying to answer the question here. Grass-fed beef patties from animals we've raised, buns that are baked by a friend of ours who's a baker, and a grilling sauce, which is fashioned by Chef Scotty Yates, who's using a bunch of our maple syrup, and some other ingredients, and some lees, our cider fermentation, in his grilling sauce. And so it's kind of a bit of a Heartwood love package, right? That we want to get out to people, for the May long weekend. So that's part of it too, is like, it's trying to be creative, and resourceful about how to keep the lights on. So I think those are kind of a couple of ways in which I try to stay grounded, and we try to try to keep the business, the business going. Love package. All right. Love package. You had me at barbecue.
Yeah.
Nice.
I love those. Before we get to Troy's question, which cider would you like to talk about next?
Next, I'll talk about Blue Bear's brother.
Okay.
So this is one that we make with blueberries, and so on this one we loved the expression of the blueberries so much that we decided this one we didn't want to filter it. We wanted to. So I mean, for anybody who's not sort of intimately familiar with the processing of these craft beverages, like typically you have to stabilize what goes out of the bottle, right? So you can't have a bottle that goes out with a bunch of sugar and a bunch of yeast, because it's going to re-ferment and you could have, your bottle could blow up, right? It's not what you want. So there are two ways of creating stability from that. I mean, just simply speaking, one is to sterile filter, so you get rid of all the microbiology. And the cost of doing that is some flavor stripping, right? It's inevitable that you're going to strip some flavors in that process. The other approach is just to make sure that you have absolutely no sugar in your resulting cider. And so with some of our fruit infused ciders, we've actually decided to let them go completely dry, and then we don't filter them. And by not filtering, we believe there's more flavor and there's more presence, and we love it. And fortunately, it seems like people are getting more of a taste for dry products and dry ciders. And so this one, you'll notice, I mean, if you have a bottle of it, you'll notice that there's some sediment on the bottom, because unlike beer, it's very difficult for us in cider to keep solids in suspension. The solids tend to fall to the bottom. And so you'll get like a little pack of sediment, which is mostly just, fruit material, pectins, colloids that remain in the solution because we're not filtering it. So those fall to the bottom, but I love just the power of the fruit. And since people are interested in the stories, our cider maker, Matt, so here's the story here. Our oldest son, Kieran, was born in a house that we co-own with Matt's parents. So Kieran and Matt are now 25, and they're both actively involved in the cidery. And so when Matt was a little guy, so we've known, obviously both Kieran and Matt for their entire lives. And when Matt was a little guy, he had a bear that was known as Blue Bear. And his mother took him to the library one day, and Blue Bear got lost on that trip. And this was devastating for Matt. And so his mother, being a caring and compassionate woman, ordered a replacement Blue Bear for Matt. And it arrived at his house one day, and it was all wrapped. And she had the retailer add a note inside the box saying, this bear is actually Blue Bear's brother. We're sorry about Blue Bear, but this is his brother, and he really wants to, he wants to come live at your house. So, and Blue Bear's brother actually had more tenure in Matt's life than Blue Bear originally did. And so as he grew up, this was his comfort blanket. And so it seemed natural when he made, and actually so this cider was his first that he made from start to finish, kind of under his own management, right? Without somebody watching over his shoulder and coaching him. This was really his first end-to-end project. And so it seemed natural that it would be known as Blue Bear's brother. So that's where that one comes from.
That's a fantastic story.
Yeah.
And so connected to, your family and Heartwood Farms. So
right. Yeah.
So I can go back. Troy asked a question a little bit further back about what would it be like blending 50% apples from like a 25-year-old tree versus with 50% apples from a 15-year-old tree?
Hmm.
So would the age of the tree actually have an impact on the flavor of the apple?
That's an interesting question. So we have I mean, the thing that you're looking for mostly in the apple is, I mean, there's obviously a certain flavor profile, and then there's an amount of sugar in the apple juice. And we have a small device called a refractometer, and you can actually go out into the orchard and you can take an apple, you cut a piece of it, and you squeeze the juice onto the lens of the refractometer, and you then read that, and it tells you how much sugar is in the juice. And actually, I mean, once the tree is productive, usually if it's a grafted tree, it'll come into production at 4 or 5 years. And the fruit is completely usable at that point. Honestly, I've never done or seen any kind of longitudinal study that tries to answer the question about whether the flavor profile of that apple or its fermentability changes over time. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting question. And generally, when you buy apples, like if you source apples for cider and you get them from an orchard, I've never actually heard of anybody stipulating the age of the tree that the apples, you know, should come from. They stipulate the variety, and they sometimes even put conditions on the amount of sugar level and even the amount of other flavor compounds in the apple. But I've never heard of anybody sort of saying I want this to be from a young tree or an old tree. So interesting question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Yep. Katie, on a wholly different tack, wants to know if you're a purist or would you put ice cubes in your cider to cool it down?
I notice this is a real question.
Yes.
Well done. Well done. I don't tend to put ice cubes in anything because I don't like them to dilute. But I have a friend who swears by these whiskey cubes, right? These metal cubes you put in the freezer. And so they chill things like an ice cube, but they don't melt and leak water into your stuff. So I don't, but I know other people that it's standard fare, they put ice cubes in their cider. So do it.
Yeah. I have glass ones. I don't have metal ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do they hold the cold? Does glass hold the cold?
They transfer the cold fast enough, but they don't hold the cold like a metal one would.
Right. So, oh.
But they actually look really cute in the glass because they look like real ice cubes.
Right. Yeah.
So tell me, what have you found the most challenging hurdle because of COVID?
Well, I mean, it's really hard to make plans, right? I mean, it's, you know, in March, we had, so for us, it's not really like, I mean, though cider is our biggest, the biggest enterprise on the farm in terms of volume and sales and stuff like that, we really see cider as being kind of a means to an end, right? And the thing that we're actually trying to accomplish is we're trying to build a sense of community of people that are looking for deeper connections to the natural world, to each other, to land, to animals, to agricultural practice, to food, all of that sort of stuff. We're just, our ethos is all about trying to find those connections and really amplify them and give people the opportunity to experience those. That's kind of what gets us out of bed in the morning, right? And cider has just been a really interesting way to pull people onto the farm, right? And give them these other experiences as the primary benefit. And so in March, for example, during maple syrup season, we had a series of tours called Secrets of the Sugar Bush, right? Where people would come out and we would show them our whole sugaring operation. And people find this really it's a really interesting thing, actually, how maple syrup is made and the ways, again, you want to talk about like science and art sort of coming together. It's a perfect example of that. So we love doing that kind of stuff. And for a while there in March, we were doing like 3 different groups a day, groups of 10 or so. So it was kind of within the limits of what people could do outdoors. And then all of a sudden that all shut down. And we actually had to refund a whole bunch of people's tours because we couldn't honor them anymore. And so, I mean, that's sort of bread in the bone for us to do that stuff. And so it's kind of hard not to be able to offer that to people, right? Normally at this time, we'd have people would come out and they'd have drinks out in the forest here that you see behind me. And they'd be exploring the farm and meeting the animals and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard. I mean, financially, it's hard not to be able to run those because that's a part of our business. And just kind of emotionally, it's difficult not to be able to do that either, because it just, sometimes it just makes you feel like a retailer, and that's never really what we got into this for. I think that's probably the trickiest part, I would say, of the COVID adjustment, And so, to my earlier point about, predict and control versus sense and respond. Like, these are the days of sense and respond, right? Because nothing is predictable and nothing is within our control. So I guess, you asked, Bill, what was the biggest challenge of COVID? And I would say that's been a hardship. But the flip side of that coin, like the silver lining, I suppose, is that it does feel like all of us are developing a kind of a sensitivity to what is emerging. And it's not necessarily a comfortable feeling or a happy feeling, but I think it's a necessary, intuition. And so.
Change is always uncomfortable, isn't it?
It always is, sure.
Yeah, because it's a lot of unknown inside of it. Shiraj asked a question that's intriguing to me. Is there a target temperature for serving cider?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, but for me, my preference is I like a sparkling cider to be served at like fridge temperature. But we have another cider, we've done some still ciders, and one we have called the Gangster's Mistress. And it's an oak barrel aged still cider. So by still, I mean not sparkling. And I actually think that loses something when it's served cold. I prefer that one to be at room temperature or slightly below. I would never serve it. Well, so there's that. At Christmas time, we have a cider that we call wassail. And so it is steeped on, a variety of mulling spices like cinnamon, cloves, star anise, nutmeg, that sort of thing. And that one, we actually like to take that one and heat it up and serve it hot in mugs. So, I mean, I do think there's a whole range, but I tend to, summertime, I like it out of the fridge. Yeah. Yeah. What's the origin story for which one, Shirag?
You have permission, Shiraj. You can ask him.
Gangster's Mistress, right? So we're just outside of Guelph, and one of the sort of storied establishments in Guelph is called the Albion. Like, smile, hand up, whatever, if you know the Albion. Yes, right. Lots of people do. Right. So there's a haunted house story about I think it's the mistress of Al Capone haunting the Albion Hotel. And I don't even remember the details of the story. I don't remember how Al Capone's, mistress winds up in Guelph or at the Albion Hotel, or how she dies. But there's this idea that that she haunts the upper reaches of that legendary establishment. And so, of course, we like going back to the rum runner days. We know that all kinds of bootlegging was done in oak barrels, kind of moving in discrete channels underground, and whatever. And so this was our first cider that we made aged in an oak barrel. And so one thing led to another, and it just wound up being the Gangster's Mistress. And I don't know, I may have even butchered the story, but it's still a good story, so it doesn't really matter. Now, you don't let the facts get in the way of a good story, right? So
absolutely,
that's the Gangster's Mistress. Yeah. The Biggest Little Farm, yeah. So that's Katie's question. So I actually have not watched it. Val has watched it, and pretty much everybody else I know has watched it. So I feel like I kind of get the plot line, and yes, I mean, the kinds of things that those folks are doing are very much connected to what this whole movement is about, right? And it's not just them and us. It's everybody who's trying to do ecological agriculture, right? Who's trying to kind of bring food to people's tables in more ecologically friendly ways. Can, I think, kind of relate to that. Now, there's this kind of curious thing in that movie about just the zillions and zillions of dollars that go into that project. And it's never really clear where that money comes from, right? Because I mean, the vast majority of people who are farming ecologically are doing it on a shoestring. But I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that movie and just the ways that it has kind of, evangelized the cause, to so many people. Yeah.
Community harvest, the third one we were going to talk about tonight.
So community harvest, again, there's a sense of cider making or wine making that's very rarefied, right? Like it's about the technique and the precision and the artistry and the scientific acuity of the winemaker or the cider maker. But there's this other aspect, and I think it's maybe particularly expressed there, where it's really community endeavor, right? If you look at the old country, cider presses were community places, right? That's where people brought their apples, right? And they'd be all crushed as a fungible sort of thing, right? It's not like these are my apples, this is my cider. It's like I'm making a contribution to this press, and we're gonna make some cider, and everybody gets some, right? And so, for us here, we're in the country, but we're hardly remote. And yet you drive up and down these roads and the hedgerow trees are just laden with apples. And over and over again, you hear stories of people, who have, granddad's farm has an apple tree, and the apples now just fall to the ground and squirrels get them or they rot or whatever. And so a couple of years ago, we put out a call and said, bring us your collected apples. If you have some and you don't know what to do with them, bring them to us and we'll figure it out. We'll take whatever we get, we'll press it, we'll ferment it, see how it goes, and we'll share back, to anybody who contributes. We'll get, some of the proceeds of that batch. And the funny thing is, every year that we've done it, so this is completely uncontrolled, right? I mean, there's no recipe. The recipe is just the apples people bring us. Now that said, we do So we have a couple of favorite trees, and we always forage those trees pretty hard to make sure we've got some high quality stuff going into this. But I mean, apart from that, we're just kind of taking whatever we get. It's always a wild or spontaneous fermentation, so we don't pitch any commercial yeast. So it's really just kind of, we take the apples we get, we let the fermentation go as it will, and at some point we bottle it. We condition it as well, so we'll put a little bit of sugar into the bottle so that there's a fermentation in the bottle that creates that creates the carbonation. But I mean, every year, Community Harvest is actually one of my favorites. And it's the one that we pay next to no attention to, you know? And sometimes it makes me wonder why we bother so much and fuss so much with the other recipes. Let nature run its course, and it's so good. So anyways, so the naming of the Community Harvest is kind of obvious, right? It is exactly that. It's probably our one cider where I can say the name and the contents are the same thing. No tomfoolery in the naming there.
I get a cedar tone right on the nose when you first get the nose.
Is that right, eh?
Yeah. It doesn't come through.
I was going to say, one of the things that we always do with Community Harvest is we load up a whole bunch of crab apples.
Okay.
Crab apples tend to ferment pretty tart. But they ferment tart, but also with lots of character. So there's lots of things to smell and taste. And so, you know, and so if some of the apples we get are kind of nondescript or a little bit flat, then, you know, blending that in with, you know, with a good sort of crab apple fermentation will kick it into high gear. But cedar is interesting. I hadn't heard that before.
It's what hits me right off the top, but it makes sense because the back tone of crab apple is slightly bit like cedar.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
So
nice.
So I have a question for you. If you could spend a day making a cider with anybody, who would that be?
Wow. If I could spend a day making a cider with anybody, I would spend that day making it with Wendell Berry. Not because Wendell Berry knows the first thing about cider. I don't know if he does or not. But Wendell Berry is an agriculturalist and a philosopher and just a deep lover of the natural landscape. And I think if I could teach that guy a thing or two about cider making, I would probably learn tenfold what I would teach. So yeah, I wouldn't actually if I could spend that day, I wouldn't actually spend it with another cider maker. I would spend it with somebody who was really interesting to me and with whom the making of cider would precipitate a great conversation. That's what I do.
That was not the answer I expected, but I love it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So where's he based out of?
He's in Kentucky, I think.
Okay.
And he's a fairly old man at this point. And so I don't think he gets around all that much. And he's not exactly in apple country. So it probably won't happen. But it's interesting to think about.
Absolutely. Do you read?
I read like a wild man. Yeah, I read lots and lots.
So what would I find on your bedstand tonight? What are you reading?
Right now, I just started reading a book called Bee Time, which is about the dynamics of a beehive. And the remarkable ways in which these little creatures work together, figure out what to do, just go about their business without much fuss, you know. It's remarkable. So that's kind of that's the nonfiction that you'd find. I also am reading. So Mark Carney, formerly the governor of the Bank of England, and prior to that, the governor of the Bank of Canada, has written a book on values. And I find it interesting to think about the guy who is perhaps the biggest financial luminary on the planet, saying basically that the economy is not working for us anymore. I find that fascinating. It's a bit of a tough read, but it's been good. And what's the most recent fiction I've read? I really enjoyed a book that I read earlier this year called The Glass Hotel I think it's by Emily Mantel is her name. It's a great story about a massive Ponzi scheme, and it's just incredibly well written. And she actually wrote another book, which I read, called Station 11, which is a book about a pandemic. And it was written long before this pandemic. And so I find the prescience of some of that stuff to be kind of interesting, like, you know? Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I got a bunch of stuff.
What would I find on your playlist?
So my son has just introduced me to, like, me and my kids, we all love kind of like I'm going to call it progressive jazz. We love like Wolfpack and Snarky Puppy and Corey Wong. And so Mike Lettieri is a guy, he's a guitar player for Snarky Puppy who has a solo career. Anybody know this guy? Any hands or smiles or no? Anyways, it's just, oh God, I just love this stuff. It just gets in my bones. It's pretty kind of, you know, if you didn't like jazz, you probably wouldn't like it that much, but I love it. But, you know, so Remy says obscure and esoteric. But, you know, I'm also perfectly happy to, you know, to run the, you know, the Joni Mitchell soundtrack or Jackson Browne, you know, like I mean, shit, every now and then I just play Running on Empty and I just, you know, sit down and I just feel like it's transcendent, you know?
That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So what has been the single best piece of advice you've ever been given in your life?
Interesting question. Single best piece of, you know, it's probably not as bad as you think it is.
I'm not thinking anything bad. I'm just curious, what's the best piece of advice you've been given?
No, that's it. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's the advice, right? Yeah. I mean, I think there's all kinds of, I think we foreclose on all kinds of windows of opportunity in our lives because of risk, right? Because of fear, because of the way in which things could go wrong. And then you get these people sometimes, and maybe I'm kind of one of these people who just does shit anyways. And stuff doesn't usually go that far wrong. You know? Like, it's like, how bad can it really be? Like, you're going to take an adventure, you're going to spend some money, whatever. You're going to be poorer, maybe on the other side of the adventure, but really, how bad can it really get? You know, is the bottom really going to fall out? And it's funny because when you have a mindset that says, you know, it's probably not as bad as you think it is. You know, the bottom probably won't fall out. It's probably not risky, actually. You start doing more interesting things in your life, right? So yeah, I think that's things that sort of dismantle the paradigm of fear and hesitation. Like, to me, that's good advice. Life is short, you know?
I do know life is too short.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one last question.
All right.
You can choose to answer it or not answer it. In your experiences at Heartwood Farm and Cidery, what's been the biggest single mistake that's happened? Or in the unedited version, what's been the biggest fuck up?
The biggest fuck up. It's funny, you know, like it kind of comes back to that last question. Like, it's probably not as bad as you think it's going to be. So the very first year that I did this, I started with 4,000 liters of apple juice that I let ferment. And 3 of those 1,000 liters went horribly reductive. So what reduction means is, if you have an unhealthy fermentation, then the yeast start cracking apart the amino acids in the apple juice to get at the nitrogen that's in there. And as they do that, they release hydrogen sulfide, which is a gas that can smell like rubber, like tar, like feces. It's nasty stuff. And I got quite depressed about this, because here I had embarked on this new adventure. And I thought, oh my God, like, I've ruined. Like, I went out and I bought my juice and I ruined it. It's, you know, and it was kind of devastating, actually. But, you know, at the end of the day, so I did 2 things. First of all, I went back to the cider press and I just bought more juice, right? As insurance, right? Because I thought, okay, well, if I fuck these up, if that's a complete write-off, I want to have something else, right? That I can backfill with it. But the other thing I did was I just tried to learn as much as I could about what a reductive fermentation was and what you can do about it. And it turns out there's all kinds of things you can do about it. And in the end, the juice that I thought was a complete write-off turned out to be just fine. So, you know, take a chance. So that's the advice, Bill, that you asked about, right? I mean, it's probably not as bad as you think it is.
That's fantastic. Brent, it's always a pleasure to share time with you and hear your story. Thank you on behalf of everybody at Beers with Bill for taking time with us this evening. It's been an enlightening and wonderful experience to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I always enjoy it. It's a real honor, and it's delightful to see all of you again. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Remind everybody that next week,